Good morning, everybody. My name is Sanjay Bonde, and I am the CEO of Trade Capital Corporation. I welcome you to this fantastic morning where we have got incredible panelists, and the discussion couldn't be more topical about how 2023 would evolve in business. I want to welcome everyone, and I think we seem to have people attending from all continents. We've got people from the Americas, the Europe, as well as Asia, and you're at a different time zone. So if we are interrupting your dinner time, my apologies, but hopefully this would be good food for thought, and I think you should be able to enjoy this conversation. As I said, I could not be more privileged to have this absolutely wonderful group of Yossi, as well as Aris, to participate in our panel discussion today. Yossi Feinberg, he is the Adams Professor of Management and Professor of Economics at Stanford. And he also participates as a director for the Stanford Ignite, which is an entrepreneurs group. And to his credit, Yossi actually received his PhD at the hands of, or dissertation under the guidance of Professor Aumann of Jerusalem in Israel, who is a Nobel laureate. So I'm really, really happy to welcome Yossi, professor from Stanford. Thank you for joining us, Yossi. Really appreciate your time here.
Thanks, Sanjay. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And then I also have Aris. Aris Kekedjian is with us. And Aris has spent a career at GE. And right now he is the CEO and chairman of Trinity, but he's seen the full life cycle of how value gets created, what are the stresses that get evolved. Being at GE, one could possibly anticipate all the different situations that he would have gone through over his 30-year career. He was the custodian and also the chief portfolio manager for several companies and portfolio investments. He's worked on restructuring. He's worked on M&A as well as repositioning companies. At his latter time, he was also the CEO of Carl Icahn's Icahn companies. And for those who know Carl Icahn, I think you can well be advised that if you're not adding value to your companies, you're probably going to get pulled over and asked about some tough questions to see, where you might be going, perhaps, not in the right direction. So, Aris, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. I think you might be on mute. Aris. So
I appreciate it. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you. So with that, let's just launch onto this subject. And the subject is a little bit provocative. So what can we do to not destroy value in 2023? Think about that for a moment. We've gone through really topsy-turvy economic cycles over the last 3 years. We've gone through a full pandemic. We've gone through a recovery. We've gone through an economic upcycle. We've gone through a down cycle. We've gone through absolutely low interest rates. And now interest rates are all-time high over the last maybe 15 years. Inflation has stabilized, but still high. It's a little bit of a tricky situation. I don't think we've been in something like this in the past. People try to put together a straitjacketed approach to recessions or stagflation, and not all of them are similar, or they have their nuances. So let me throw up a question here to Aris first, and then we'll want Yossi to remark on it. What do you see is the current cycle, this economic cycle? Do you see realities that are different from the past, and your impressions of it is?
So we were just talking about it a little bit with Yossi earlier, right? I mean, I asked, what are the kids thinking these days at Stanford? And I think it's been 15 years since we've had a recession. So it's almost a generation of people who don't know that cycles happen, right? It's natural. It's going to happen. You had the Dutch tulip craze, and 1,000 years ago. Like this will happen. It's just part of the natural cycle of what we go through. And so what I'm seeing is, I'm a little surprised that all these companies that are announcing layoffs. I'm a little surprised at how late they are. You could tell this was going to happen. Inflation was obvious. The Fed was going to have to get aggressive and all that. So I think in a way, typically recessions are like 7 years or whatever over time, but this has been 15. So I think even companies lost that muscle of how to be quick to react to the change. Okay. But that being said, these are the best times to build businesses. Most of the great companies get built through a recession because they build resiliency. And I'm trying to, I spent, as you said, I've been working with big companies over the years, but I'm literally building a company or rebuilding a company here to have a growth culture, but more importantly, a culture of resilience. Because if we're really smart about this the cycle we're going to go through, we're going to pick our spots. Okay, we're going to take advantage of people that maybe we couldn't take advantage of a year ago. Deals that were impossible are all of a sudden possible. Everyone's valuations crashed, right? So the possibilities get very, very interesting right now. Making the smartest decisions during this cycle, you come out of it potentially in a much stronger way. And that's the cultural mindset I'm trying to drive. And I'm a big believer in that. I've seen that happen. That's what we used to do at GE. Downturns were opportunities.
Excellent. Well, that actually brings in more context and color. And yes, we have we call ourselves the bald eagles at TCC. We have seen at least one, if not 2.5, through the cycles, ups and downs. And I think resiliency is of paramount importance. Managing through the turbulence and getting it out on the other side, not only safely but more stronger and more efficient, is very important at this time. So with that, I'm going to divert this conversation to Yossi. Yossi, you're at Stanford, where I think you see all of these developments in their embryonic form, and also try to resolve issues of larger corporations. We live in an ecosystem here, in a microcosm in the Bay Area, where you have both the benefit of looking at absolutely small, tiny companies that are coming up very aggressively, and the big behemoths of the world. So your impressions, please.
So I will start by saying, Aris is absolutely right. Recessions will happen in various shapes and forms. The challenge really is, and it's a challenge to my colleagues who are macroeconomists, the challenge is that each one of them looks different, right? I mean, it's and that's what makes them difficult to predict, difficult to react to. And I think what we want to look at is what is common across those recessions. And most importantly, and this is where I'm coming in with my passion for organizations and their ability to succeed and grow and innovate. To me, that is the question, which is there a lesson that we can take across all these situations where there's crisis, whether it's in an industry or in an economy, where companies actually can do better. And in many cases, it's counterintuitive. So let me start, that there's a famous paper called Roaring Out of the Recession. And this is a paper by Gulati, Noria, and Volgezogen. And they published it in 2010, I believe. And they looked at recessions, and they looked at what companies did as a reaction. And the natural reaction that most companies have is, like Aris said, be resilient, tighten down, have control over what you do. But what Aris also said, who's going to win? And it turns out that the 9% of companies who actually did invest in long-term things like marketing, things like their operations, things like innovation even, during those tough times. So they didn't suddenly panic and just looked at the expenses, but they looked at the future and they did make the investment. Those companies were actually, success. They were the winner later on. So, out of, almost 5,000 companies that they looked at, those companies got a 10% sales and profits advantage over the competition coming out of the recession a couple of years later. And I think that's the lesson. So to me, the question is, what are the insights for leaders right now that are counterintuitive, but are going to help them to win? Because as you said, it's a cycle. So we're going to come out of it at some point.
I think that augurs very well. I'm sure our audience has a lot of questions as you think through this. If you have any, please go to the Q&A section and ask your questions. We will try to take them up towards the end of this conversation. And if you're not able to answer those questions, we will be certain to email you a response very soon. Yossi, you talked about making choices. You talked about making choices here because now during the time, resiliency and investments are at odds with each other. Think about that. You've got limited resources. You want to conserve your capital. You want to farm your capital during this time and handle it as a sacred good. You never know whether this is going to last maybe for a year or 3 years. So with that ambiguity, I think companies would have to make choices. So are we actually talking about how companies take risks in where they invest in and the foresight, and how do they go after those calculated maneuvers compared to just a straitjacketed cost control approach? Is that what you are referring to here?
Yeah, so that has two parts, right? One part is what is the psychology of decision making in the organization, and how does that change under pressure? So, naturally and expectedly, we overreact. So there's more fear than there should be. So that's one thing. And that's, there's
and not enough fear when there should have been.
Not enough fear when there should. Exactly. I mean, that's it. It's both ways. There's the survey, the CEO sentiment survey. And, when you look at that survey and you're saying, well, CEOs, they look at the horizon, their sentiment is probably somewhat, a leading indicator and so on. Not so much, right? It really is not something that you can you can bet on, right? Necessarily that it's a good predictor. And there's a herding effect as well. I mean, now the problem is that a lot of this herding effect and this group thought can turn into reality, because that becomes its rational expectations. If we all believe that the market will go down, we'll act accordingly. The market will go down. There's no doubt. And the same is true in the economy. And part of what the central banks are trying to do is really address that and change the psychology, impact the psychology as well. So that is the part. But, you're right. I mean, there is pressure that has accumulated, and companies need to react to that pressure. But my view here is that everything, the attitude to risk, because people become more risk averse when they need not necessarily be. The other thing that people do is they shorten horizons for decisions. And that's another phenomena that actually I think is even more dangerous in a downturn. Because what happens in a downturn, and not just a downturn, what happens when we have shocks? When we have shocks to an industry or even an economy, and think about shocks in supply chain. I mean, that's one of the big shocks that we have. When we have those shocks, it's not only hitting, demand and supply. It's really hitting the market structure and market power of different companies. So if you don't take that into account strategically coming out of it, right, you will be potentially, either an opportunity to rise to the top. And I think that connects to the paper that I mentioned, which is when all the pieces are up in the air in an industry due to these shocks that bring in the slowdown or recession, then really opportunities, but also big risk about market position come up. And short-term decision-making is your enemy here.
I agree with that. I think, look, you've got to, there are some fundamentals when you go through something like this that are true in any recession environment. And there's some unique attributes of where we are now, okay? The fundamentals are, and it's like a lot of what Yossi talked about. The two things any good CEO can do is allocate capital and allocate the best people. Okay, this is the moment where, and those, by the way, in a booming economy, everything's sloppy, it's messy. You're not really doing it that well, and because you're getting away with even shitty decisions. Sorry, but you are. Okay, the reality is, in this environment, it's triage. Now you really focus on who are my best people. Are they on the most important projects? Okay. And where are we putting our money? It's time to get rid of the hobbies. If you're thinking of it that way, right? And you're making them quick, which is great in some level, but you can't peanut butter this. We're not going to, it's like take 10% of the workforce off everywhere. Well, that's not management. That's not leadership. Okay. That's mathematicians. That's your CFO running amok. Okay. You really need to do capital allocation and people allocation. Those are the only two things you can control. You don't control the economy. You don't control any of that. That's background noise. You got to focus on what you can control. Where are your competitive advantage? Where are your attributes? And where do you build the resilience? Okay. What's unique in this environment, in this current situation, is by the way, every recession has a different underlying cause or element to it. You know, you had the financial crisis that changed the way, you know, the whole financial system came out of that crisis. It changed the way we do, you know, we borrow money and do things like that. We just came out of the pandemic. The pandemic caused a lot of the issues, right? We overspent, blah, blah, and all that. The supply chains got out of whack and all that. But more importantly, we had a step change from people, consumers' expectations, people's lifestyle expectations, work-life integration. We used to talk about work-life balance. It never existed. You have work-life integration now. People are just, it's all blurred. Okay. Expectations have changed in my world. You know, I'm in the diagnostic testing world. I'm like, I asked the question, I'm like, post-COVID and after we've all kind of figured out how to take care of our health and everything else, by the way, every other technology, every other industry is moving to the edge, right? My kids are asking why they have to go to a doctor to get a cholesterol test. I'm like, can't you send me a test? I'll give you a drop of blood and put it on my app, and I know what to do. All the, managing cholesterol has been on the internet for like 50 years now. Like all that information's been out there. It's nothing new, right? It's an empowerment that is expected now. Okay. And the other thing is industries converged. You had a lot of industries converging over the last 10 years. Some of them were stupid, but a number of them are very interesting and they have real potential. And that's why if you pick and choose your spots, all the noise is dying down, all the stupid competition, all the wasted capital, all the VC money chasing stupid ideas. That it's actually good that you can actually drive discipline, all right, in this environment, if you know what you're doing from a business standpoint, have a little bit of experience to guide that. But the most important thing is we just went through a massive change in the way the world works. If you're going to tell me we can't come out of this cycle with the next Google, the next Apple, the next Facebook, then I think you're delusional. You know, some people are going to take the stuff that we're doing. We're not going to have drones flying around doing deliveries and all that. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. But you know what? Some of the technologies that we saw out there, you know, like I don't understand cryptocurrency. I never understood the point of a currency, right? But I understand the value of blockchain technology, right? I mean, eventually we're going to disrupt the title insurance business using it. It's like, it's going to happen. It doesn't make sense that it exists the way it does. But we had all this noise. Underlying all this noise during, you know, when you're in a frothy environment, underlying all this noise, there's some great stuff that was developed. And now the quality teams will actually make real businesses out of these. I believe that. And if you don't believe that, this game's not for you.
So I'd like to build on that, Sanjay, if I may, because I think Aris is making fantastic points and sort of giving also, you know, great advice. So I want to take those points and sort of build on them because, you know, those secular trends that Aris is talking about, these are not things we can't predict. And you can, you know, first of all, there are secular trends that are across every industry. Customers want things faster. They expect innovation faster, just like delivery. The speed of things is accelerating, which means that the pressure on production is increasing. On the other hand, we had the secular trend of, you know, focusing on basically, again, the speed and quality to an extreme, as well as lowering the cost. Mm-hmm. So what happens on the production side when everything is stressed? Hey, it works. And, you're making more money, but the moment there's a shock, all your pipes are made of paper because it was the cheapest. They're all gonna burst, right? And that, we saw that on a global scale, right, with supply chains. But it happens inside the organization as well. So those parts that are making money were actually not necessarily, the fat went to the right place in terms of making sure that they can react to challenges. Now, the other secular trend is that in every industry now, there is no fear of disruption for startup companies or investors. And the gluttony of investment that we had really meant that new technologies were coming out in an accelerated way. And Aris, if you spend some time here in Silicon Valley, you'll believe in drone delivery very quickly because there's so much being invested in those directions. And you're right, there's a correction now. But the psychology of the entrepreneurs, I can disrupt any industry I'm in. That thing is not, you can't put that back in the bottle. And that's another trend that large companies need to deal with. So again, it brings us to, you need to keep innovating. You need to kill those, projects that are vanity projects and everybody knows that's not the future of the company. That's not where investment it is. But you need to take into account, right? If I put all the insights together, you need to take into account that market structure will change, and the winners will be those that will react to the secular trends 2, 3, 4 years from now, right?
You're hitting something on the head, right? I mean, what happens during the frothy times? You get FOMO, right? Even Bill the Valley gets it, right? And so you're chasing all kinds of stuff because you think, drones are going to fly around and everything. By the way, I think there's opportunity for drones, but like the FAA is not going to let everyone just fly drones around. That's not going to happen. It's a whole process involved. This is where the adults actually kind of come in. What happens is you go through a recessionary time like this, the crazy ideas go away. And the adults come in and say, you know what? We can make real businesses out of these things. And the two things I'm always focused on are actually three things. I only want to do disruptive things. There's no point going after stuff that's not disruptive, big TAM or whatever. Like Me Too stuff is pointless, especially if you're going to go through. And a small company being Me Too is a waste of time. Okay. So you got to be disruptive. But the two things you got to remember, which gets lost sometimes, is forget how cool the tech is. Like, all right, you're a consumer. Does it make sense to you? Would you actually do that? We lose perspective on some of that. And then the most important bit of it is, at the end of the day, I'm sorry, maybe I'm a bit old school, but your business model eventually has to have a profit element to it. Okay. Somehow you're like, I get it. If you're going to lose money for a while and everything else, that's fine. But somehow there's some element of what you're building, underlying what you're building. Okay. You're building some kind of operating leverage. And you're looking for a trigger point that's going to turn that into profitability. If you're not thinking that way, you're delusional. Because they're not sustainable long term. Why is Google and Apple worth so much money? The growth is one thing, but they're profitable. Is that, they make a lot of money. Biotech companies, people invest in them for a reason. When they score, they're very profitable. Right? So that's the holy grail. And I've seen business models and it's like stupid stuff goes away. Like, in my industry, I mean, I have competitors who chase CAC. I'm like, why are you chasing CAC? There's like Amazon, Apple, these people all have billions of customers. Aetna has lots of customers. Why am I like, you're crazy. Everyone wants to be Amazon. I'm like, I want to be Shopify. Okay. I want to enable disruption that these guys want to, they bring me the customers. I just need to bring them solutions. So it's like bringing logic to all this incredible innovation that's taken place in life. Look, go back 10 years. Go back. I mean, how did we live before the iPhone? I have no idea. But think about the innovation cycle. And when you put the froth away, wow, there's some real businesses you can build here. And that's what's pretty exciting,
Aris, the vigor with which this conversation is going is just phenomenal. So I'm sitting here enjoying this conversation as much as I think our audience is, and looking at the energy that Aris depicts here, and look at it. I mean, he's worked with GE, he's worked with Carl Icahn. I think that's where he got maybe a double dose of the energy, and then again now at a smaller company. It's palpable. You can almost sense this. Are the
Yeah.
leaders of a recession stagflation era different than the leaders in a normal growth time where there's lots of cushion room and leniency to do fad and fancy projects?
Of course.
And what we see in talent management that is so different of all the leadership team, not only the CEO, CFO. Can you comment on that, Aris? And also, I would like your call on that as well.
So look, I'll tell you, it's really easy to be the company cheerleader when everything's great. Okay, it's really hard to keep pushing the vision and selling the company vision, driving a sales culture and innovation culture when times are hard. This is when it's hard. I mean, it's easy to be a leader when money's available and everything seems to be going well, right? So I think it's you got to have vision, and you got to believe in that vision more than ever now. That's how you get through these cycles, right? You got to have more conviction in the core of what it is you're good at, right? Not the things you want to be good at and pretend to be good at. Like, what are you? Like, this is what this forces you to do as a leader in this environment. It forces you to really bed down and say, what are our core competencies? What are our competitive advantages? Okay. And where are we going to go make a difference if we bet big? And it's hard to bet big at a time like this, but that's like, I'm getting people motivated in a recession environment because we're betting big. Yes. Okay. They want to be like, that's what they're here for. And so, and do I wake up some days sweating? Of course. Wondering if I'm crazy? Yeah. But you got to be the leader. I mean, this is when you got to bestow the confidence, the vision, the clarity of where we're going. The heart, and you're going to tell me this, but at a time like this, companies go through maximum confusion. There's no clarity. Nobody knows what things are going to be bet on longer term, what's going to get cut, who's going to get, like, it's just the worst time. Provide clarity as soon as possible. Stabilize your core by providing that clarity and being transparent. Like, you know what? Yeah, tell them the good and the bad. I mean, I don't hold anything back. I'm like, I don't have time to reinterpret what I'm like. I'll flow right through to you, right? Be transparent. I think the best thing you can do is like let people know exactly what you're dealing with. That then you're killing all the wasted energy around rumors and possibilities, and like these are people and families. The sooner you give them some stability, the sooner they're going to be focused on the mission. And we don't do that very well in a time like this. Some companies do real well, but especially companies who've never been through it, they don't know how to deal with it. And the one thing about the tech industry is, even the way we do it is, we're firing people by email and stuff like that. I mean, it's like, we're clunky at it. It's not what we're good at.
Yeah, the talent management isn't easy, and it's not for people who are just sort of made leaders overnight. I used to say this: there are appointed leaders and there are disappointed leaders. And right now we see more of those leaders who are disappointed because they never had to sit on the wheel and actually change the gears or do things. Yossi, in your talent management processes and strategies, do you see a difference in the way the corporate boardrooms and the corporate conversations need to occur, the people at the wheel, and how processes should work?
So I would say this, when a group of people goes through crisis, I would ask what comes on the other side. And I think there are two options. One option is that group coming out on the other side is falling apart and, basically disintegrating, or they're formed stronger bonds than, you could ever have without a crisis, right? The challenge brought them together, created a stronger culture, a stronger community. And the question is, how does a leader under pressure, really, again, looks at the long term and asks, how do I get my top people, my best people, not only to stay, not only to thrive, not only to execute, but basically create a culture that coming out of this is an exciting place to be, where we are leading in the industry, where everybody else wants to join us and wants to know. And, professors like me want to write cases about them. That's in hindsight, what have they done? And to me, one of the things, I think Aris talked about all the things that the leader needs to do, probably needs to do even before the crisis, right? Those are great pieces of advice: the transparency, telling people the way it is, probably, creating trust or reaffirming trust. I would add one small thing, which is hope. I think the leader having a clear, clarifying the vision, clarifying the strategy, what Ari said, it's essential, but also let people see, again, because you are the leader, because you are seeing that longer term vision, show them that yes, there'll be hard work, but get them excited about where you can be on the other side, rather than all the doom and gloom and fear that is very natural for people to have.
The company thrives off the leader's energy. Okay,
yeah.
That's just the way it is. If you got the positive vision, the conviction, right, and the energy, and you're on the go all the time, the whole place is going to operate that way.
Yep.
If you're down and hiding in your office, hoping things get better, you know what? That's what the whole organization is going to feel like. And here's the thing, okay? Some of this stuff's not complicated. Like, this is when companies' valuations have crashed, right? Every company's like hung up on dilution now. Every founder, everybody. I'm like, you know what? Provide your employees as much stock, your best employees, at a time like this. Go double down on your top 20, 30%. Give them a shitload of stock. Now, that's good dilution. Okay? Like, that's more valuable than anything you might do on a merger too. Like, this is the moment to use the stock. A lot of companies have that to your advantage. That's how you build hope. They can do the math.
Yep.
Right? And it's also you showing commitment to them. And then that also embeds hope in people. The leader is actually betting on me and believes in me. They must know something.
Yeah.
Right? It's just psychology, man. This is what it is. And I think we do, this is not, be straight up with people, okay? Be normal, be cool, all right? This is not textbook stuff, all right? This is like experience. This is case studies. This is, you learn by watching. Like, the only thing I've ever learned about leadership is by watching good leaders and bad leaders, right? And the best thing I ever learned is I worked for one guy at one time for 4 years. And he somehow managed we were overseeing a whole bunch of portfolio companies in a number of countries. And he oversaw like literally 25 misfits, each CEO of each country managing their business. Nobody was similar in any way. They all had different points of view culturally and we'd have staff meetings like misfits. Somehow he got this team to work collectively like you've never seen a team work before. He knew how to get the best out of each individual, and he knew they were the best at what they were doing, okay? And his only advice to me is, listen, I'm the head of HR. That's my job. And this is more important now than ever. And a lot of leaders right now, they're hanging out with their CFO all day long and not spending enough time thinking about your head salesperson or your R&D head, right? The stupidest thing you could do right now is kill the sales culture, which a lot of companies will do. It's the easy thing to do. And the other really easy thing to do is kill your pipeline. You have to prune your pipeline. That's exactly what you should do. Get rid of the vanity stuff. But you can't kill the engine of the place. And the hardest thing is keeping those things going. Your CFO is screaming at you, and you're making sure your top 23% of people believe in you. Well, you know what? Give them a bunch of stock and tell them you love them. And a lot of them will come to you with a lot of good ideas to help you through it. Don't go hide in the office with your CFO. It's not the way to do it.
this is so fantastic, commonsensical, as well as as a studied view together. We're getting both portions in the same construct here. We talked about talent management. We talked about culture. We talked about being mindful. We talked about being deliberate. We talked about being on the wheel. We have to be more conscious of the decisions that are being made. We talked about short-termism and don't fall prey to things that sort of destroy value. Not only create, but you've created value. Don't destroy it over this period of time. How easy or difficult is it to implement a strategy at this time, Yossi? You've seen product management strategies, marketing, all kinds of strategies. When resources are constrained, we've got to deal with the fires. We've got to be very, very direct with the teams. Does it get better? Do you think it adds value? What's your...
So I think that it's kind of connects to the research that I mentioned earlier, which is the companies that win are companies that, all along probably had a strategy that was a dynamic strategy, was not a static strategy. In this world, when the environment is changing so quickly around us, as we said, all the secular trends point to acceleration of every process. Companies that have this fixed strategy that doesn't allow the organization organically to constantly evolve and change and innovate, those companies are in big trouble now, because it's just, what is strategy? Strategy is alignment, right? That's what it does. It gets everybody to understand what we're trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, what success looks like, and gets everybody to plan and execute accordingly. If it's rigid, when you hit a shock, people are lost. And it's really not a good time to rethink your whole strategy, right? Especially in established organizations. So my suggestion is that it's never too late for a company to examine its strategy and make sure that strategy has a dynamic component that allows people and basically guides people in how to innovate. And, you talked about product management. It's one of the things I teach in the business school. Product management is, product-centric organizations was a way for companies to organize in a way that's closer to the customer, faster innovation, right? So companies that have done that are companies that basically part of their organization strategy was to be much more dynamic and innovative, right? But I think you don't want to do it by chance. You want to do it in a planned way. You want to have a strategy and innovation and actually implement it now. Are you people creative about the challenges that they're facing? From your salespeople, your marketing people, your procurement people, are they ready to actually take action that deviates from how they've done everything in the past in order to address new situations? I think that's the message, I think, to companies and, strategy. There shouldn't be a strategy and an innovation strategy somewhere else. That doesn't work.
Your strategy should be innovation, right? I
Yep.
mean, look, if people confuse vision with strategy. I don't think your vision typically changes, okay? But your strategy has to be dynamic. You got to bob and weave. So, and people are afraid. And the best thing you could do as a leader right now is admit the mistakes you made. Like, that was stupid. It doesn't make sense. Move on. It's a sunk cost, exactly. Right? I try to teach my kids early in their lives, learn the concept of a sunk cost, okay? Because then you won't dwell on things that are pointless. Well, we spent money on it. If it doesn't work, move on. And I think this is where we admit that's why strategies that are dynamic is people realizing things that didn't know were going to work, that all of a sudden get traction because you're being observant, right? And you're testing and learning, and you're letting go of whatever you thought was, the holy grail. If it doesn't work, you let it go. And you'll find that your strategy doesn't change that much, but it gets refined. It gets smarter. It adapts to the environment that changes. And so, that's the thing people don't understand. Your vision usually doesn't change, but the inputs you're gathering constantly evolves your strategy. And right now, the recession is an input. It's a great input. Is the way you're going to market resilient enough to deal with people when their disposable income goes down? If not, maybe there was a problem with your business model. So refine, right? So like you got to look at this as opportunity. It's just a mindset shift. And I think that I think people just like sometimes are just really afraid to, you know, to admit to something. Maybe, you know, I took a big bet and it didn't work. So what? Great leaders make those, like they admit it sometimes, right? When that happens, they move on. And it's just the hardest thing to do.
You know, it's so pertinent to say that, Aris. We don't revisit our strategies, we don't recalibrate ourselves, we don't take external inputs. It's like you're driving along a freeway. You see deer on the road, you see bad weather, you see good weather, you get ice on it, you get dry ice, and essentially you can't drive at the same speed nor with the same technique. You have to change your tires sometimes. You got to change stuff, and I think, and it has to be very vigorous. This is a fantastic conversation. I would think our audience is really benefiting from this, even those who haven't been able to join. There are a couple of questions here that I want to bring up. You know, there are geopolitical stresses coming out of either China's reactions. One very unknown thing in the world right now is China and Ukraine. Let's just understand that these two things can go in any direction and can certainly bring out extreme volatility to the world order. And again, right now, growth is hampering. So you think about, we don't have answers to where do we bring the next dollar in from and where do you bring the next growth in from. We know that there are forces against us. How do you see this extraordinarily, turbulent, unforeseen, unpredictable environment and mix it with the situation of today? What goes through your mind? Let's ask Yossi first, and then I want to direct the same question to Aris.
Yeah, so I think it's tempting to put the energy into prediction and making judgment calls about the future. My recommendation, it's much more efficient to look at the resiliency and basically responsiveness of your organization, right? So you don't know what's going to come. No one can predict, right? What's going to happen exactly. And the question is, when you look at all the possible scenarios, where is your organization with respect to those scenarios? And I think if you're not ready for them, or at least not ready for them specifically, but not ready in the sense that your organization can react and has the culture to react and has the strategy to react and has and I love what Aris said, the vision can be constant. The vision is about the value that you're creating. What do you bring? What does your organization bring to the world that makes it better? and that can be very constant and give hope to people. But then your organization is people who execute. And the question is, do they have the tools, the flexibility, the know-how to react to that?
Sometimes we dwell on things we can't control, right? And it's like, focus on the things you can control. That's the difference, right? Otherwise, you end up paralyzed. I can't control what China might invite. Do I think they're going to invite that? Who knows? It's irrelevant. But what can I control? I can build a supply chain that is resilient, that is flexible, right? So we have a choice. We're going to put something in right now. We're debating. Should we put it in China? I'm like, why don't you look at India? I mean, Apple's moving everything out of China to India. Maybe they know something. I mean, they'd run a pretty good supply chain. So like it's what am I going to do about it? I can't dwell on it. Now, it's an interesting thing. I grew up in an area where globalization was the big thing, right? I mean, the wall came down, all that kind of stuff. And it was a positive era. I mean, everything was so positive, right? We're kind of we're cycled back around, and all of a sudden being a globalist is no longer, I don't know, hip, right? But this is what you don't understand. You need to be a globalist in your understanding of geopolitics and the possible implications to make your business resilient. All right. It's not the stuff we did in the past. It's not all about moving everything offshore and anything else. It's understanding the fact that the world is changing constantly. So what are we going to do to adapt? And I got it. I'm running, it's a small company, but it's a global company. And, you learn about the trends that are happening in different places and the potential implications. And so I just think that you don't dwell on it, but get smart about it. Don't be ignorant. Okay. The world is a big market, and think about how do you position your company so that it can be flexible around some of these things, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, nobody predicted the Russians were going to invade Ukraine. If I told you that 2 years ago, you would have said, what? You know, I thought they wanted Crimea and that was it. No, you know, who knew? Like, I don't know what. And we're all sitting and focusing on Taiwan. I bet you it'll be something we didn't expect. It's just always like that. It's always something unexpected. So that you can't like, but you know the trends, you know, resiliency of supply chain. We learned everything about supply chains, okay? They weren't resilient. Yossi was talking about, they were made out of paper for many of them, okay? We relied on, you know, the Chinese economy basically effectively subsidizing the whole supply chain around the world. Well, you know, when the whole thing slowed down, the costs, the whole thing went up. And China's slowing down. We got, like, we had, by the way, we had this incredible technology revolution last 15 years. And over the last 30 years, China ran, you know, drove the global engine of the economy, right, around the world. So that's going to slow down. You don't have to be a genius. Just look at the demographics, right? So what does that mean for your business, right? What worked for the last 10 years or 20 years is not necessarily going to work going forward. And so don't dwell on the one-off things. Ask yourself, more importantly, what's going to happen to the Chinese economy in the next 10 years? Because that's going to matter. What's going to happen in India the next 10 years as a result of what happens in China? That's going to matter. That's half the world's population right there. Right? And it's going to matter.
Yes.
So that's where I think geopolitics and education in geopolitics, being well read, read The Economist once in a while, right? Just like get off your social media and just find out what's going on in the world a little bit. But that's what you've got to be able to have context to make your business resilient is just my view on that.
You know, the way that you just said it is be approximately correct than precisely wrong. Be commonsensical. Just read and don't be stupid. That's what I've heard that from you. But at times here, it's easy to be stupid and be ignorant. And you know, I think I really agree with the points, especially because we guys are in supply chain. TCC's business is about trying to build resiliency on supply chain and how do you de-risk it? How do you take capital out from companies and give them that capital to do other good things that we all talked about. You know, and I think unless business leaders understand the new realities and bring this to bear, there are going to be some leaders who are vigorous and some who are just bystanders. They got so many things on their plate that they really don't tackle the critical issues. So we got to understand how a leader drives the environment. So that's really good input. One more question that we have, very rudimentary. I think we already answered that. How do you motivate a workforce that doesn't work in your offices? It's all disparate locations and it's all spread out around the world and not in the same time zone. I think we've already dealt with it. I think the leader creates the culture. So any quick comments on, you know, how these changes of work from home, etc., apply for the next few years? Do you get bothered about that, Aris?
I've been a fan of for my entire career. I've like give my team all the technology, and I really don't care if they come to the office or what they do. And some people work well at 3 a.m. Some people work I don't care. Here are your goals. Figure it out. Whatever works for you. But you got to be able to be part of a team. Okay. So I've always before all this Zoom and stuff, I was always about give people technology and flexibility, because I never believed in work-life balance because it doesn't exist. You got to give people work-life integration. Let them figure out how to integrate their work in their lives. Okay, it's an empowerment thing. And one thing though, I got to tell you, post-COVID and all this change is, and I worry about this with my kids and the younger generation and everything else. Okay, it's still a people business. Business is still a people business, okay? You have to sometimes fly to Bangkok, sit down and have dinner to close a deal, and then fly home. Yeah, that's just sometimes something you got to do, okay? So half of what I do is convince somebody of the vision that we're on. I don't do that in 2 dimensions that well. I'm much better in 3 dimensions, okay? It's a skill that I think we're losing a little bit, and I worry about that. The other thing I miss, or I worry about is, and we've got to be better at this, we got to get the teams together from time to time just to drive discussion and innovation without, like when you're on, we're not brainstorming on a Zoom. It doesn't happen. It's hard. It's not how we function. But if we're sitting around a table having a drink because we spent all day together and we hung out and then a good idea pops out, right? So we're missing the serendipity a little bit, okay? And I think that is critical. I'm a big creative guy, and I think you got to create that energy. And so you need to create interactions with people that are face-to-face more often. Not like you used to be. I don't care if people come in the office, but we've got to find ways for people to differentiate. Look, when you're negotiating a contract and you got 17 lawyers and you're, don't go flying all over the world to sit in a conference room. That's a waste of time. Do it on Zoom, okay? When you're going to pitch a vision, a strategy, a partnership, a sale, get on a plane, okay? That's just I just trying to create, it, to me, that's the balance. It's like, don't waste the energy on stuff that's a waste of time, right? But where it's going to take, where you're trying to go after a massive TAM with a creative idea, get together once in a while at least.
You know,
And and the other thing, as a leader, I got to tell you, in a virtual world, it's my job to travel more than anybody else, to go see them on a regular basis, to take them out to dinner, to tell them you appreciate them every once in a while. I think the leader has more of a responsibility in this environment. And I get like a bunch of CEOs are trying to make everyone come to the office. I'm like, you get out and go visit them. Create venues to go visit them. They just need to see you.
You know, this is such wonderful advice. We've come up to the end of this conversation. The vigor, the energy, the drive. I think there's so many excellent messages that audience are going to take about it. Things such as, you know, don't waste your energies, don't waste your resources, be mindful about where you are engaging your company's strategies. All of those are very, very pertinent. And also at this particular point in time, you've got to discriminate between so many available opportunities. Where you have invested in the past, and perhaps dissect the things that don't work out like you would getting through a very tough driving environment. All of these inputs resonate very well. Conserve the capital, but put it to good use. Don't just put it into your sort of corporate cash, kitty that doesn't actually produce innovation, produce the things for tomorrow. We heard that from Yossi. That's certain death. If not today, in the near time, you would not be competitive. Your advantage you lose. So with that, I'm just going to ask last words of wisdom to our esteemed guests. Yossi, any closing comments from you before we close this panel discussion?
Yeah, so instead of general comments, I actually want to also build on what Aris just said. Remote work is probably not going away, and fighting it, will have limited consequences. It has pros and cons. So that actually my colleague, Professor Levav, did a research on how people innovate remotely versus in person. And, there are things that people actually do better remotely, even with innovation and creativity, because it's actually a safer space for many people to sort of come up with more, ambitious ideas. But in person, they form the ability to show better judgment on those ideas. And therefore, basically you can't just assume that we're gonna go one way or another. There's pros and cons with each one of them. And I think the leader role, as Ari said, is really to guide the team on how to work, how to succeed, how to innovate, how to react to crisis. And Ari summed it up as, be smart. But the challenge really is helping people be smart about those decisions and giving them the backing to make those decisions and try new things in new environments. And that's really a big, whether it's crisis or innovation, I think it's sage advice in both cases.
I don't think we said anything that's not practical at some level. It's just it's a bit of wisdom and experience, the benefit of having been around a while. How you give your kids advice and they give you the eye roll? I turn back and I say, by the way, this is free. Okay. If I knew what I knew now at your age, like I'd do anything, right? I have so much power. So, all we can do is take the innovative capability of the great smart kids that Yossi gets to teach, and give them a little bit of wisdom through these types of experiences, so that they can put some judgment around some of these fantastic ideas and their incredible ability to harness data and technology. I mean, kids can do things today we could never do, and but a little bit of wisdom, and that's what happens in a recession. You know, you build some wisdom. A whole bunch of players in the valley are going to learn a lot of the lessons, and a few of them are going to build real businesses as a result. That's what's happened every time. I'm old enough to remember the dot-coms blowing up. You know, like we were, and guess what came out of it? Google. You know, before that, you thought Yahoo was going to be like, you didn't know. People, smart players made smart decisions through cycles. So this is a moment to create great business. All right. So it's an opportunity. Don't see it as a negative.
Fantastic conversation, both of you. I can't be really more thankful. Never let a recession go to waste. That's what we've heard just so far. And I think there are great lessons for our audience. I want to thank again the audience for joining us and being patient from all over the world. And again, send us any questions that we may not have answered. We will. But this was a very vigorous conversation. I personally have taken up so much inputs, and I think our teams are going to be quite enlightened with that. We're going to make this available online for as many people to see, visualize, and benefit from it. So once again, thank you very much, Aris and Yossi. Appreciate your time, and we would let the other teams go back to their everyday business. Talk to you very soon.